Hi, friends. It's Friday again. Can you believe it? Uh, it's unbelievable. This week just flew by for me. I'm a little tired, but uh, happy to be here live with you again. We've been doing this for a whole month already. I can't believe it. This is our fourth live session already. Seems like we just started like last week. These weeks have just been flying by. So much going on. The spring is a busy time. Spring sports for the kids are getting started up again, and a lot going on at school, and trying to get some things done at the house. And it's just a really, really busy time. So it's wonderful on Friday nights to just kind of pause and spend time with you and open the Word of God together and pray and hear your prayer requests and do what we do on Friday nights at 7:30. So welcome back. We're glad you're with us. We're glad you decided to take time with us here tonight with me. And it's going to be a good time. We're going to study what we released on Sunday, just like we always do. So, Friday night is our live session based on the content of our podcast episode that we release every Sunday. So, this one is a follow up or a companion to last Sunday's episode where we talked about President Trump and Bible prophecy and how he relates. And we heard a bishop. We're going to hear from a bishop tonight. Again, that clip that we showed in the main episode, uh, calling him like Emperor Constantine, whether that was a good thing or not. Of course, we'll let the episode speak for itself, and we'll delve into a little bit different angle tonight. But it's all on that same topic: is President Trump in Bible prophecy? What's going on with the United States? Is the United States named in Bible prophecy? And how should we relate to all of it in the times in which we're living? So again, welcome. Thanks for joining me. I keep saying us. It's just me. It's just you and me. Thanks for joining me, and hope you had a really good week. But even if you didn't, you're in the right place. So I want to give you a little update. Our prayer challenge is still going on. I'm hearing from people. We heard from Crystal this week, who said she had family in town by surprise, or it was a surprise bringing family in town, and they made it safely. So that was a wonderful answered prayer. And the podcast is we're seeing God move in powerful ways with the podcast. We're seeing more and more people reaching out, which is really good. It's it's an interesting thing to constantly be creating content and talking to a camera, and not knowing whether very many people are watching or enjoying it or connecting. And so when we hear from you, it's encouraging and it helps me and Pastor Miguel want to keep going and recording these and engaging with you all. So when we hear people are taking us up on the prayer challenge, it's always encouraging. And not only that, but we love to hear how God is moving in your life. And remember that prayer challenge, what it's all about is talk to God twice a day. Commit to speaking to God 2 times a day. And even if you're a person who has never spoken to God before, maybe you're angry with God, maybe you've walked away from God, maybe you don't know how to pray, this is just a challenge where we're going to commit together to just talk out loud or in our mind to God 2 times a day and just see what happens. Remember, the title of our podcast is Try Jesus, and I can think of no better way to try Jesus than to talk to him, challenge him, say, Lord, are you there? Are you listening? Show me. Help me to know. Help me to be convinced. So yeah, we're excited. This is Cal. Nice to see you. Thanks for signing in. Thanks for saying hello. Glad you're with us. And again, the prayer challenge, if you'd like to sign up and be part of the prayer challenge, go to the website. It's right there on the screen, tryjesusauburn.com. And about halfway down the homepage, you can see a little box to sign up. And when you sign up for the prayer challenge, I will email you back and just send you an encouraging note, ask you how it's going from time to time. If you have a prayer request or an answered prayer, you can reply to that email and let us know what God is doing in your life. Not only does that encourage me and it's good for you, but also we can share these things online in our live sessions to be an encouragement to other people. Because if you're talking to God and God's answering your prayers, He can do it for them too. So please be an encouragement to each other. Send in those prayer requests. In addition, as you hear me say every week, we don't pay enough attention to when God does answer our prayers. We constantly cry out for God for help. Lord, help me do this. Help me to know this. Provide this for me. And we seldom remember to thank Him and track when He actually does intervene in our lives. So it's time we start tracking, because I think when times get tough and we struggle, if we're tracking, constantly tracking and remembering and thinking about how God hears our prayers and answers, it'll be easier to get through the difficult times. So please remember, sign up for that, take that prayer challenge, communicate with us that you're a part of it. The other thing I wanted to mention is I met a fantastic guy. Sometimes you can find me here in the Auburn Starbucks doing some work. I like to get out of my regular office. And this week, I just had a beautiful experience. I was there on my computer, there in my booth at Starbucks, and I heard this guy having this spiritual conversation over the phone, and he was encouraging someone over the phone and saying, take it one day at a time, let the Lord give you peace, and put your mind on things that are above. And so when I was done with my work, I was on my way out, and I was ready to leave, and I thought, well, I didn't think, the Lord impressed me to say, you know what, you need to talk to this guy, you need to introduce yourself to this guy. So I got out one of our podcast flyers, and I went over and I just said, "Hey, I heard you having this spiritual conversation, and I just wanted to let you know it was a blessing to hear what you're saying to that person." And he said, "Oh, yeah, yeah, this lady I know recently lost her husband, and she's really discouraged," and telling me about why he's encouraging her. I thought the guy was a pastor, to be honest, because he was so patient and kind and knowledgeable in the things he was saying. And I thought he was a pastor. He wasn't a pastor. He's actually a fairly new believer, he said. And Lord is really moving in his life. And there's just some people where you can just see the presence of God shining out from their face. And I could see that from Randy this week. So I'm just so glad that God set up that divine appointment to meet Randy. And I think Randy may be watching tonight, or he's watching the podcast. So, Randy, I thank you for being a new friend. And thank you for that spiritual connection we had there. And I hope to see you soon, and I hope to talk more with you soon. So keep Randy in your prayers. Randy's a good guy, new follower of Jesus. All right, so here's an announcement that I have that I need to share with all of you. So God is blessing the podcast in many ways. As I had said, we have many people reaching out, contacting us for the summer camp giveaway. Stay tuned to the end. I'm going to give you information again on how to take advantage of the summer camp giveaway in the Adirondacks. We have people reaching out for the prayer challenge. We have people reaching out with Bible questions, commenting on the posts. It's all wonderful. But you all need to know this and recognize this. The podcast also has challenges. So one of the things that has been so helpful and successful in helping us to make the podcast as known as it is we've had a bit of an advertising budget. We've been trying this out, trial and error. We've been trying different things, and God's been connecting us with a lot of people. But we recently have come to the point where we are in desperate need of renewing those advertising funds to keep the message going out to the community. Now, I'm not here asking you for offering. What I'm asking you to do is to pray about this. And also, I mean, don't get me wrong, if you want to give an offering, by all means, reach out. We would love to have it, but that's not why I'm here in this live session with you tonight. What I want you to recognize is that because we've kind of hit this, normally our posts are just flying out there on Facebook, they're flying out there on YouTube, and you'll see them regularly in your feed. Because our advertising budget is no longer, we're not utilizing that anymore, you really need to subscribe. You need to follow us on Facebook if you're not already. You need to subscribe to the YouTube channel if you're not already, so that whenever we have a video or release new content, you'll know when it comes out. So again, it's not going to be as prominent and out there as it was because we're trying to adjust some things and figure out what works best and try to come up with a budget for future advertising. So what you need to do is make sure you subscribe so you know. Subscribing helps us on many different levels. The more subscribers we have, the more the YouTube algorithm will put it out to other people. It just helps us in so many different ways on Facebook and YouTube, also Spotify. The more subscribers we have, the better it is for the podcast. You'll know when content comes out. And the other part of this too is you can help the podcast grow simply by sharing and liking the videos and commenting on the videos. So anytime you see something new on a YouTube release or a Facebook post, if you just hit like and share, say, hey, this was really a blessing to me this week, or send this to somebody specific, that helps the podcast tremendously by spreading the word. The best growth is organic growth, where people say, I'm really blessed by this podcast. Check it out. That's when we get the most bang for our buck. We're no buck. It's free that way. So please help us be a digital missionary. Share the content, share with people that you know would be blessed. But make sure you like and subscribe, because it's going to be key to the future of the podcast as we continue to move forward. We're going to still continue to make content. We're going to still try to improve some things. In fact, I'm going to be moving my little studio here to a little bit bigger space, and it's going to be better for everybody. We're going to have some community interviews coming up. Big announcement. Yes. In April, at the end of April, I have an interview scheduled with the chief of police here in Auburn. I'm trying to schedule someone for Autism Awareness Month. That's April, to talk to an expert to help better educate us on autism and autism awareness. So we're going to continue to do these local things as well. So a lot of great things and amazing things happening. Please continue to keep the podcast in your prayer. Follow, follow, follow. It's going to help everybody and help you know when we release new content. So here is our question. Let's have a word of prayer, and let's hear our question for this week, because it's in relationship to the episode we just released. Lord, thank you so much for this week. Thank you for each of my friends who have spent time with me every Friday night in our live session. Lord, you know exactly what's going on in their lives. I ask that you'd reach out and bless them and help them, and just be a part of their life and help them to know that you're near. Lord, bless us now as we open your word together. Give us peace. Open our minds. Help us to ask good questions, and be our teacher. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, here's our question for tonight based on our Sunday episode. Chris asks this: what does it mean that the second beast in Revelation 13 speaks as a dragon? Okay, this is going to be a good one. I can tell already. So, Chris obviously watched the episode. And in that episode, I shared a video. I began with a video, and I don't want to repeat all the content from the episode, but what I do want to do is I want to share with you this video that was the introduction for the topic. So here.
Through your leadership, you embody the values of our Christian faith and love for the gospel. You remind me of the great Roman Emperor, Constantine the Great. This emperor, your dear Mr. President, is the one who founded and built the magnificent city of Constantinople, my birthplace. No.
Okay, that was the Archbishop of the Church, the Orthodox Church, the Greek Orthodox Church in the United States here. And as you heard, he was born in Constantinople, and in the Greek Orthodox Church, we talk about this on the episode from this week. Constantine is revered basically as a saint, and they say that he is equal with the apostles. And the reason they say that he is equal with the apostles is that he made it legal to be Christian. And he actually, in time, made Christianity the accepted and official state religion of Rome. And In the episode this week, we talked about how many Christians think that's a great thing. The book of Revelation doesn't necessarily agree. And we talk about Constantine, the history there. We look at how Constantine's time is described in the book of Revelation as a time that is not something to look up to and to cherish. Actually, it was a time where there was a lot of compromise and Christianity became watered down. A lot of Christians still look to Constantine as a great figure because as Christians, it's often difficult to deal with the culture and the times and feeling like our beliefs or our a way of life is constantly being challenged or pushed away or not accepted or even rejected. And so, as Christians, in an effort to be prominent or have a special place or to be listened to, quite often we love leaders that will put us in the forefront, that will make it popular to be Christian, so that we don't have to apologize for what we believe in. And we feel like the more that prominent people, actors and politicians and all these people, the more we have in our court, the better it is because it becomes more accepted that way. Well, the book of Revelation warns us a little bit against that kind of a mindset. So we looked into Revelation chapter 13. So I just want to encourage you, if you want to hear that discussion, go back to that episode that we released on Sunday, watch that episode. But in that episode, we talk about Revelation chapter 13. And in Revelation chapter 13, we introduced two beasts. And Revelation chapter 13 talks about a beast that comes from the sea. Again, in the episode, we cover that. We think this is Europe, a power that rises up out of Europe. And there's a lot of interesting discussion about this beast and what it means and who it represents. But there's a second beast in Revelation chapter 13. And we made the case that this second beast is actually the United States of America. And as you continue to read through Revelation chapter 13, it's not good that this potentially could be the United States of America because this second beast makes people worship the Antichrist power. It makes people believe in false worship, believe in a false God. They receive the mark of the beast. And it has a lot to do with religious liberty. And so that question, what does it mean that the second beast speaks as a dragon? That's the distinction that it gave. So Revelation chapter 13 says that this second beast, and again, here we see on the screen that a beast is representative of a kingdom or a nation or a world power. And it said that this beast has two lamb like horns, or it has lamb like qualities. And actually, in the Bible, in Bible prophecy, horns represent power or political exerted power. So the horns or the exerted power look like a lamb. Well, in the Bible, what does a lamb represent? In numerous places, and even in the book of Revelation itself, Revelation 5, 6, and 12 tell us that the lamb in the book of Revelation represents Jesus. So this is a nation that prides itself, puts itself out there as having Christian qualities. But the description goes on a little bit further, as Chris was asking. It looks Christian on the outside, but it speaks as a dragon. Well, what does the dragon represent? Well, Revelation chapter 12 and verse 9 tells us that the dragon is Satan. So it looks Christian, but speaks as like the devil. Ooh, boy. We're getting into it now. A nation, how does a nation speak? So how could it speak like a dragon? Well, a nation speaks through its power and its laws. So this nation would seem Christian, but through its exertion of power and its laws, speak like the dragon. Could that ever possibly describe the United States of America? Could we be talking about the United States of America? Well, how does the dragon speak? So if the United States of America were ever going to speak like the dragon, we need to know how a dragon speaks. And I think we can probably all identify with the first description here. How does a dragon speak? Through lying, through manipulation, through flattery, through temptation, through blasphemy, through backbiting, through gossip. So our power, the way we exert power, the way our government operates, does it operate on that stuff? Yeah, it has. It's inception, right? But interesting, something else that the devil speaks like or represents is false worship. So, does the Bible say that this beast, potentially the United States of America, would usher in false worship at some point? Well, the word worship actually comes up 6 times in the chapter that we're talking about, Revelation 13 and Revelation 14. So the word worship comes up over and over and over again. And really in the context of who do you worship? Do you worship God or do you worship these man-made powers that seem like they're going to save the world, like they're going to make a difference, like they're going to change things? Who do you worship? So Revelation 13 and 14 set up this tension between the power structure that humans have set up and salvation only in Jesus alone. And so, boy, how could a Christian nation that resembles the lamb, how could that speak like a dragon? Well, we showed the first part of that already. But let's talk about it in a practical sense here for just a second. So, some of you may recognize this. Maybe you've never heard the term before, but you understand that this is happening. Uh, Political commentators have something they call the pendulum theory, and the pendulum theory, I think, is pretty well documented, and we can see it. So, what this teaches is that you have the left and the right. A pendulum swings back and forth like on a grandfather clock, and so what this teaches is that the two political parties society will have a time where it swings more to the left. Society will have a time where it swings more to the right, based on world conditions or the economy or any number of different factors. And what pendulum theory teaches is that tends to happen is that society tends to try to self-correct. So when it feels like it's swung too far in one direction, it will topple, it will begin to teeter and topple, and society will go, "Whoa, wait a second, we got to correct." It's sort of like when you're walking and you lose your balance and you stumble and you try to catch yourself, right? You catch yourself by countering the weight. Well, that's sort of what the pendulum theory teaches. So when society recognizes they've gotten too far one direction, well, it tries to swing the pendulum back the other direction. But just like in human nature, what we tend to do is when we go to correct an imbalance, we correct it by swinging the pendulum too far the other direction. And actually, I see this all the time in people's spiritual lives. They live a life apart from God, live a really rough life, make a lot of bad decisions, and then when they become a Christian, they become ultra rigid, super conservative, way too far the other direction, so much so that it's incompatible. And sometimes their faith can't keep up with their lifestyle, and their heart can't keep up with their lifestyle because they've made the pendulum swing too far back in the other direction. It's not sustainable. Well, in politics and in our world, in a spiritual context, it's not good that we have these drastic swings of the pendulum because the more the pendulum swings in one direction, the further it's going to swing back in the other direction. We get these wide differences back and forth on either side. And I think if you've been paying any attention to politics, that's exactly what we have going on. We were under a certain regime for a while. The pendulum swung one direction, and now society's like, whoa, we got too far off to the left. Now we're going to swing to the right. But is it possible that we're swinging too far to the right? Now, some of you are saying, oh, it's a good thing that we're swinging too far to the right. That's a whole nother discussion. But this is what the pendulum theory teaches. And it also teaches that potentially at some point, the pendulum could swing so far one direction that actually topples the whole thing over altogether. So it gets so far that it can no longer self-correct, and it actually topples over the whole thing. So let's look at this a little bit further in the context of Christianity. Now, over the last 4 years, especially, I know many Christians have struggled with the idea that things got too far to the left. Um, and we won't get into all the details because I don't want to debate tonight about whether one thing is right or another thing is wrong, policies and things like that. But I know a lot of Christians who felt like things got too far ethically and morally to the left. They felt like Christianity had no voice anymore. It felt like there was persecution. I admit, even at times, I sort of felt that way. Like, what is going on? Things are just completely out of control. And it seemed like churches weren't having a voice and Christians weren't being heard and pushed and marginalized. Well, now that we have a Republican president who has connections to the evangelical right, a lot of evangelicals are saying, and Christians are saying, hallelujah, it's wonderful. Now we're no longer marginalized. Now we are accepted and put in a place of prominence again. Is that a good thing? In some ways, of course it is. In other ways, we probably better be careful. And this is what the book of Revelation is actually warning us against. So um, let's look at this together. Uh, Christian nationalism, and again, I'm not going to debate the positives or negatives of Christian nationalism tonight. But what I want you to see is, and constantly be putting your mind on, is can we get too far in one direction? So much so that the pendulum swing could actually topple the whole system over without even recognizing it or intending that to happen. Is that possible? Well, what is Christian nationalism? This phrase gets thrown around a lot. But basically, it's this: Christian nationalism is a form of religious nationalism that focuses on promoting the Christian views of its followers in order to achieve prominence or dominance in political, cultural, and social life. Political, social, cultural, and social life. All right, so a lot of people watching this are saying, um, boy, isn't this a good thing? Why would it be a bad thing that Christians are rising to prominence? Why would it be a bad thing that Christians now have a voice in politics and it's now sort of the state religion? In fact, I knew a pastor one time who told me that he hated the separation of church and state. And in his mind, he's thinking this is a good thing because he's think or that it's a bad thing. Christian separation of church and state is a bad thing. Religious liberty is a bad thing because he's thinking the tenets and the morals that Christianity teaches is, why wouldn't you want that? And study after study after study shows that, going to church and believing in God and having a faith in Jesus and being part of a community, all that stuff actually is a great benefit to your health and to society and everything else. So, why would I be here on this podcast, or why are we as Christians saying, why would we be against Christian nationalism? Why wouldn't we want Christians to take control? I would say, listen to what I'm about to say, but also go back to the episode we released on Sunday to talk about the time of Constantine and what happened under Constantine and why I get so nervous when I hear people calling Trump like Constantine. It's pretty clear from scripture. It wasn't a good time and it didn't turn out well. So, religious liberty, and I see Cal's questions out there on the thread. It says, is it bad to have the 10 commandments in schools? Is it bad to have the 10 commandments in schools? Again, is it a bad thing to have the tenets of faith prominent and in front of everybody? Great questions. Religious liberty in Revelation chapter 13 and 14 is actually an issue. And the question that I have is, and I want to hear from you on this, put it in the chat, send me an email. Could potentially Christians actually be their own worst enemy at some point? No, I'm not saying necessarily now, but is it possible that it could get to the point where Christians, because they're overcorrecting because the pendulum had swung too far in one direction, could we get to the point where we've swung the pendulum so far in the other direction that we become our own worst enemy? Now, what could I possibly be talking about with that? Let me ask you this question. I would love to hear your comments and your thoughts on this. If Christians rise to prominence and Christianity becomes like the state religion, if we broke down the walls, the separation of church and state, are Christians actually even protected from themselves? Because we have to face an interesting dilemma here. Which Jesus would be the state accepted Jesus? Let me give you an example. There are some Christians who believe that Jesus burns sinners in hell, will burn sinners, or is now burning sinners in hell throughout the ceaseless ages of eternity. There's Christians that believe that. There's Christians that believe, they're called universalists, that God will save everybody regardless of their sins and their decisions. Everybody makes it to heaven. Other Christians believe in a purgatory. There's this state of where you have to sort of figure out your sins and overcome. So to me, how God deals with people like that makes a big difference about who he is. The point I'm saying is Christian doctrine is almost like brushstrokes in a portrait. And each doctrine that you have correct is a correct brushstroke in a portrait that looks like Jesus. The more brushstrokes that you have that are off, or doctrines that you have that are off, the more skewed the face of Jesus becomes. Now, don't get me wrong, there will be people saved from all faith traditions. I believe that wholeheartedly. God judges us based on the light that we've been given. But the problem is, human politics are based on humans. Humans make the decisions. When you put humans in charge, humans tend to overcorrect, they make bad decisions, they don't lead well, and make mistakes. So, is it possible that if you put Christians in charge of a state-run religion, that they would make it even harder even for actually other Christians that don't have the same version of the gospel, that don't have the same version of doctrine, that don't have the same version of Jesus that they do? Would there be a state accepted version of Jesus? Is it the Catholic Jesus? Is it the Protestant Jesus? Those are different Jesuses. And those, based on the character of Jesus, boy, it even affects how you view politics and the role of government. It's all mixed. So, how do you decide whose Jesus becomes the state accepted Jesus? In Constantine's time, what began to happen is that there were three different pockets of believers. You had pagans, you had Jews, and you had Christians. And actually, what began to happen is that Constantine saw it would be very beneficial for his empire, the health of his empire, to take a little bit of Christianity, a little bit of paganism, and a little bit of Judaism, and put them all together to make one religion. And that became the state universal religion. Thus, doctrine became watered down, which we discuss in the episode that we released on Sunday. So it becomes really complicated. And I don't even believe that if Christianity became the state religion, that it would even protect all Christians from other Christians. So it's better off, in my view, and you can share with me if I'm off on this, if you think that I'm wrong. Um, think about this with me. Do you think is it possible to put Christians in charge without oppressing people and even oppressing other Christians? Cal has a question here. He says, if we promote Christian laws, won't that convert people to God? That's really interesting. Now, I think we all, in many ways, also already promote Christian laws, don't we? I mean, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal. Those are all Christian principles, and they're just part of a good society, aren't they? So it's interesting. I believe that, Christians or the government should enforce the last six commandments, how we treat each other. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not, all that stuff, that's all good to legislate. But when government starts delving into the first four commandments, how you worship, who you worship, the way you worship, that's when we get into a little bit of trouble because now you have the human element involved. And we could potentially swing the pendulum too far, topple over the whole thing, which is actually what Revelation chapter 13 actually says will one day happen. I believe anyway. So let's look at this next slide here. It says, it's a question for you. What is your view of religious liberty? How do you define religious liberty? If Christians are in charge, what happens to religious liberty? If you don't agree with me, if you have a different perspective on this, or if you're saying, yeah, I believe that totally, and here's why, send in those questions, send in those comments. I'd love to hear from you. Does having Christians in power actually even represent all Christians? I think it's a valid question. Does it actually even represent all Christians? So, uh, I want to tell you a little story from the Old Testament. So, in the Old Testament, we have the book of Daniel. And in the book of Daniel, there's a great king who built, as we know, this is historically accurate, built Babylon, the great city of Babylon. It's one of the eight wonders of the ancient world. A beautiful, big city, was impenetrable for many, many, many generations. And the first king was Nebuchadnezzar. Well, Daniel was a Jew who was carried there because Babylon had conquered Israel. I wouldn't have time to get into all that. He was a young man. He was put there in the court of the wise men. Nebuchadnezzar has a dream. Daniel interprets the dream. And the dream went like this: there's going to be a statue that has different metals: gold, silver, bronze, iron, and clay on the feet. And it went from head to foot in that order. And what this represented was Daniel came and he said, "Hey, God's telling you something. God's telling you that you're not going to last forever. The kingdom of Babylon is not going to last forever." And so in Nebuchadnezzar's mind, this is a national crisis. I've just heard a prophecy from the mighty God that Babylon isn't going to last forever. So we need to have a sign of solidarity. We need to have a sign of unity. We need to have a sign of that we're all together for the sake of our country. And so Nebuchadnezzar, in defiance of what God had told him in the vision, he builds a statue all out of gold. And that's what you see depicted here on the screen. Because remember, the different metals represented different empires that were going to rise up. He represented that head of gold, and so he builds a statue all out of gold in defiance of what God was telling him. So this crisis, it's a call to unite, to come together for the sake of the nation and the empire. And Nebuchadnezzar said, "Oh, okay, bring me all the leaders of the empire. Bring me all the people. Gather around the statue." And when the anthem plays, everybody bow down as a sign of allegiance and unity. Seems like a good thing, right? There was a crisis in the empire. The empire was taking care of them. There was a lot of prosperity. Everything was great. And we want Babylon to last forever, don't we? Doesn't it seem like a good thing to have unity and national pride in a time of potential crisis? Well, the problem was the commandments said, don't bow down to idols. The commandments said, trust only in God. Don't trust in the empire that you're living in. So, three Hebrew boys, when the music plays, don't bow down. And they are looked at as a threat to national security. This was a sign of unity and allegiance. And these three Hebrew boys aren't bowing down. Are these guys the terrorists? Are these guys the ones that are going to cause the collapse of our empire? Are these simply because they believed differently? Their faith taught them differently, not to bow down to idols. But because they did not bow down, they stood up for what they believed. Now they are identified as the enemy. The king throws them into the fiery furnace, stokes it up hotter than it had ever been before, throws them in, they're not consumed, and Jesus shows up to protect them in this fiery trial. But think about all the similarities there to potentially what could happen in our own world. There's a threat to the nation, whether it be through natural disasters or terror attacks or whatever it might be, an economic collapse. Everyone says we need to have a sign of faith and solidarity. Let's all come together in unity and togetherness, and let's show that we're all one. Well, what happens if that sign of being one means that you have to go against the conscience and against the Bible and against your faith? What happens if even people that call themselves Christians are behind this movement to show a sign of solidarity? This is the picture that Revelation chapter 13 actually paints. It says the world's going to go crazy. The world's going to swing the pendulum too far in one direction. Now, I'm not blaming the right. I'm not blaming the left. Don't get me wrong on this. I don't specifically know. I think it'll probably be a mixture of both, but swinging that pendulum back and forth sort of contributes to the teetering of the pendulum itself, the system, the government, our country itself. But Revelation chapter 13 describes a time where there's going to be calamity, there's going to be questions, and there's going to rise to power a faith-based group led by an empire, led by a country that looks like the United States, looks like it could be the United States. And for those that don't agree with the direction the country is going, it calls for forced worship. You either believe and follow the way that the nation is teaching and showing should be right, or else. Because Revelation chapter 13, and I believe I have this here. Let me find that verse. Let's see if I've got it here. That's not it. Oh, it's down farther. There we go. Here it is. Got that passage for you. It says, because of the signs it was given, this is potentially the United States of America, it was given power to perform on behalf of the first beast. It deceived the inhabitants of the earth. It ordered them to set up an image, like Nebuchadnezzar's image, in honor to the beast who was wounded by the sword and yet lived. The second beast was given power to give breath to the image of the first beast, so that the image could speak and cause all who refused to worship the image to be killed, just like Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego. It forced all people, great and small, rich and poor, free or slave, to receive a mark on their right hands or on their foreheads. This is the mark of the beast, right? The mark of the beast. The mark of the beast. A sign of allegiance, a sign of unity, a sign of solidarity. Now, what could that possibly represent? Well, some people think it's like a barcode or a microchip. It's not. It says the mark is in the forehead or in the hand. Well, forehead, that's your brain, that's your mind, that's your convictions, right? So that's what it means about the forehead. And based on your convictions, you act, you work, you behave. That's your hand. So this is your convictions, this is your faith, this is what you're convinced of, forehead in the hand. So you couldn't buy or sell unless you had the mark. This calls for wisdom. Let the person who has insight calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, 666. We have an episode on the podcast. It's called Understanding 666. So it describes and explains what that number 666 means. So this is describing basically the same setup as what I described from Daniel chapter 3, that there's calamity, that there's a system in place, a government in place, there's a crisis, rise to power, show allegiance, show a sign of faith, bow down, be united, but yet it's speaking like a dragon, right? It's speaking against Jesus. It's a false sign of worship. It's a false place to put your hope and your faith. I think it's probably the United States in some way. Who do you think the second beast is? So write it in. If I'm wrong, if I'm off base on this, I'd love to hear from you. Let's bounce ideas off from each other. I'd love to hear it. We've got a couple of questions here. So Cal again asked, are you saying we shouldn't rely on government to convert souls? Yeah, exactly. You can't legislate. You can't legislate a Christian conversion, can you? So even if you forced everybody to bow down, even if you forced everybody to worship or to live according to the Christian way, you're not making Christians out of that. In fact, God would never want it that way. God operates on free will and choice. So even if we had a Christian nation that operated in all Christian laws and everybody was forced to live as Christians live, you're still not making Christians that way. What makes Christians is a personal heart decision to follow Jesus. And again, I believe that so much of our society is already based on Christian morals. I think more could be based on Christian morals. But we got to be careful that the pendulum doesn't swing too far in any direction. So I think this is George. He said, separation of church and state wasn't meant to keep religion out of state-operated organizations like schools. It was meant to keep the government from mandating one specific Christian religion. mandating one religion altogether, I think. It's interesting. There's a lot of debate. I hear a lot of debate out there about what our founding fathers were. A lot of say, well, they were Christians. Others say, no, they weren't. Um, it was a mixture, from what I understand. Uh, Ben Franklin was a deist. There was a lot of deism back then. Deism was this idea that, yeah, there is a God, but he's out there somewhere and he doesn't really interact with our world much at all. There was a lot of deists back then. It was a very popular religion. There was a bunch that signed the Declaration of Independence. It's interesting. I went to Boston a couple years ago, and I went to the no, it was Philadelphia. I was in Philadelphia last year, and I went to the cemetery where many of the signers of the Declaration of Independence are actually buried. And in Ben Franklin's there, and many others. In that cemetery, there is far, 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 far more Egyptian iconography on their graves than there are Christians. You don't see hardly any crosses. You don't see any fish symbols. You don't see Bible verses. You see pyramids and obelisks, and it had a lot to do with Masonic stuff. I don't want to get into conspiracy theories. I don't buy into that. I'm just saying I don't know that they were these staunch Christians, many of them, that we think they were. So it's just something to think about and give pause when somebody says, yeah, they absolutely were. It's probably more complicated than that. But here's the thing. So much of our Constitution was based on Protestantism. The Puritans came here for freedom of religion. They didn't want a country with a king, and they didn't want a country with a pope. They wanted religious liberty to worship according to their conscience. And so that's what our country was based on and built up on, the freedom of religion. People are able to worship as they want to. Now, time has gone on, secularism has come in, and it's that secularism that's the issue that has challenged a lot of Christians. They're saying we need to fight back against secularism and humanism with Christian morals and values and laws, and sort of pushing that. Is that the way to solve it? I don't know. You tell me. I don't think so, because as we continue to take away freedom of conscience, we begin to resemble that beast in Revelation chapter 13. Again, I don't have all the answers. I have clues that Revelation chapter 13 states, and I think they're pretty clear. I think Revelation 13 is the United States of America. I think that it's telling us that at some point the pendulum is going to swing so far that it topples the whole thing over. And again, I'm not saying it's the right that's doing this. I'm not saying it's the left that's doing this. I'm saying it's world conditions, people trusting in themselves and their own schemes and plans to try to save themselves. We see this all around us. We see it. It's a mixed up mess. We don't have the solutions. I mean, just look what happened during COVID. We thought we had it. People thought they had it all figured out. It was a mixed up, confused mess. I have a lot less confidence in our government's abilities to fix all these things and to solve our problems when they come up after living through that. So my hope can only be in Jesus. That's the bottom line. And so let's kind of bring that together, and let's bring that home, because that is our only hope. That's what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, those three Hebrew boys, believed and trusted in, the faith of Jesus, their faith in God to get them through, despite what the government was saying, despite what culture was saying, despite calls for them to be united, even though united meant they had to go against their conscience. They stood up for God. They stood up for their faith, their personal relationship with Jesus. So Revelation chapter 12 actually tells us the solution when the pendulum is swinging too far one direction or the other, when we're tempted to say, yeah, the Christians got to take over the government to try to save all this, and religious liberty eventually goes away. What do? Well, Revelation 12 says, and they overcame him. So this is the beast's power and the devil by the blood of the Lamb. Again, that's Jesus. There it is again. That's Jesus. And by the word of their testimony. So the testimony is their story about what God has done in their lives. So they overcame this nonsense that's in the world and the power of Satan through one thing: following Jesus wherever he goes. I've even heard people say, some people follow the donkey, other people follow the elephant, we should only follow the lamb. And I believe that wholeheartedly. So, like we said in our episode um, from Sunday, we got to be really careful that we don't think that Trump is this champion that's going to fix all the ills. We don't want him forcing Christianity down people's throats because it removes freedom of conscience and freedom of religion. What we want is freedom in Jesus. We want to follow Jesus wherever he goes, and we want a country that allows us to do that as we see Jesus leading us. That's what we want. We want a country that, yes, doesn't allow for Christians to be oppressed, that does give Christians a voice, that allows us to have a seat at the table and a voice. But we should not so long for prominence and authority and power that we begin to force it down people's throats and become our own worst enemy and begin to do the very things that we say we stand against. It's a tough thing. It's a confusing thing. But the way that we avoid doing that is that we have a personal, close walk with Jesus. A personal, close walk with Jesus. Get to know him in his word. So that even when things are confusing around us, even when we don't know what's happening, we'll know where to go because we're following the Lamb wherever he goes. We hear his voice, we see what he's doing, and we have peace in the midst of the storm. When crazy things happen and people do crazy people, when crazy things are happening, people do crazy things. But we can have a peace that surpasses all of that, a deeper peace as we follow Jesus. So that's my prayer for you. What did I get wrong? Let me know. What did I get right? Let me know. What do you need prayer for? Let me know. If this is confusing to you, if you're afraid of what's going on in our world or in our country, help me pray with you. Send in those messages. So I want to give you a little bit of a teaser for this Sunday's upcoming episode. Why can't we see God? Why does God seem to be invisible? Is he actually invisible, or do we just not see him the way he is? How can you see God more in your life? We're going to answer those questions in our upcoming episode. Pastor Miguel shares some powerful real life stories. I'm going to share some powerful real life stories in my life, how I've seen God and experienced God. Don't miss that episode coming out this Sunday. Send in your questions and comments. It'll make for a better Friday night Q&A as well. So send in those comments or questions. Before we go, I want to give that announcement. We still have a few slots open to send kids to Christian summer camp. It's a 1-week camp in the beautiful Adirondacks, many activities. It's a beautiful place. There's worship morning and evening and all kinds of fun activities throughout the day. And we are sending 5 kids there for free. So if you, your child, somebody that you know wants to take advantage of this or get more information, email me. Email me at that website right there, a web address right there. And let me say this. We've been having a few problems with our email. So people will email me and inquire about things, or they'll ask for a T-shirt, or they want to take advantage of an offer. And sometimes I will email them back and I don't ever hear from them again. And I think what's happening is that when I reply, if you email me, I will reply to you. I promise you that. I think what's happening is that it's going to spam. So if you email me and within a day you don't hear from me, check your spam because that's probably where your email went. So next week, the topic is, why can't we see God? How can we see God? Is he visible? Is it even possible? That's the topic. Make sure you don't miss our Sunday episode. Send in those questions. Thanks for being with me tonight. If I offended you, forgive me. But this is my view. This is how I see Revelation chapter 13. I hope we can still be friends. But most of all, follow Jesus wherever he goes. Keep an eye open. Could the United States be that second beast? Could it force worship? Could we get there? Could we get to that place? I don't know. But we don't want to be part of the pendulum swing that goes too far in one direction. We want to follow Jesus wherever he goes. It's all about Jesus. God bless you, Auburn. Try Jesus.